Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about our work on SearchLight, which is a 60 GHz beam adaptation protocol that I've done with my co-authors Yasun and Kasimpur and Professor Edward Heidi from Rice University. So before going into the details of our work, I would like to give some background on 60 GHz communication. So the key advantage of moving to this higher frequency band is that we have 7 to 14 gigahertz of unlicensed spectrum with individual channels as wide as 2 gigahertz and even more. And that really gives us an opportunity to achieve multi-gigabit per second data rates, which stands to hundreds of times greater than the legacy 0.4 and 5 gigahertz. However, the key challenge in moving to the higher frequency is that the path loss, the free space path loss, also becomes very high, and we have to use directional transmission and reception to overcome this path loss. And the way that most modern systems they achieve this high directionality is by using analog beamforming based on phase array antennas, such that you can focus the signal energy in a particular direction that we call a directional beam or a sector. And then by switching between different beams, we can steer the signal energy in different directions. So as I said that 60 gigahertz things are highly directional. So for a pair of devices to communicate, it is necessary that they first find out the optimal directions to kind of focus their beam towards before they can begin to transmit data to any data. So for this 8.1180, which is the IEEE standard for 60 gigahertz networks, it defines a beam training protocol, and it basically it's like a radar scan in which the devices sequentially transmit training frames along all their beams, kind of in an exhaustive search manner. So here you can see like these devices. So it's kind of like a radar scan at both ends, and then at the end, the two devices will find out the pair of beams which have the highest signal strength, and that's how a directional link is established. Now, this kind of strategy works well for static networks that you can first train for this beam and then you can keep on communicating at very high data rates. However, the issue is that when we have mobile devices in our networks, then it is possible that mobility patterns such as rotation or translation, the beams which were initially selected during the beam training process are no longer valid. So this leads to the problem of beam misalignment that can lead to link breakage, and we will have to do the beamforming training process all over again to re-establish the link. Now, the key challenge here is that there is an overhead associated with this whole beamforming training process because the search space of this beam search can be very high because of the very highly directional nature of things. So, for example, each individual device can have up to 128 beams. So 128 beams on both sides means a very large search space that we need to search over. Moreover, it is also possible that the mobility patterns sustain. So in that case, we will have to do this training process over and over again, and that can accumulate the overhead. In fact, our prior work on beam training in Mobihoc 2016, it shows that repeated training under sustained mobility may actually overwhelm the high data rate advantage of 60 GHz networks, severely degrading the network throughput. So how do we go about solving this training overhead problem in 60 GHz networks? So our protocol SearchLight deals with this training overhead, and here the key concept here is that we move this training process from in-band 60 GHz training to out-of-band sensing-based beam adaptation. And we will show that with our protocol, we can achieve beam adaptation with zero in-band training overhead after the initial alignment takes place. So the key idea in SearchLight is to track device mobility using indoor luminaries, which means we have indoor lights in almost every environment. So the key idea here is that we observe that these lights remain static or fixed with respect to the 60 GHz access point. So if we can track the device mobility with respect to these lights by repurposing them as fixed anchors, then we can track mobility with respect to the access point as well, and then we infer how to change beams at both the access point side and the client side. So if the device is moving around, we can infer the mobility, and then consequently the beams that you need to adopt at both ends. To further elaborate this design principle, there are three key stages in SearchLight. In the first stage, we measure the light intensities from the indoor luminaries with off-the-shelf light sensors, which means that we do not require any special hardware at the client devices. In the second step, we track the mobility of the devices, which means both the position and the translation using these light measurements alone. And in the third step, we steer the 60 GHz beams based on the mobility estimates. And for this beam steering, the key idea here is to exploit the dominant line of sight propagation of 60 GHz networks. And that is because due to the very highly directional nature of the links, as well as the underlying sparsity in the 60 GHz channels, which has been shown in a lot of prior works and channel measurement studies, 60 GHz links have a dominant line of sight propagation, which means the physical line of sight path is usually the dominant channel component in the profile. So the idea here is that if we can track the angle of arrival and the angle of departure corresponding to the line of sight path based on the mobility estimates, then we can keep on selecting the beams which have maximum signal strength along the line of sight path, and essentially we will be steering the beams along the strongest signal path and hence achieve maximum data rate. So here is a demonstration of our system. If the device moves around, the prior sectors or beams are no longer valid, but we can detect this mobility using the indoor light-based measurements, and then we can steer the beams along the line of sight path and hence keep on maintaining the link. Now there are two key challenges in this beam tracking problem. The first one is to simultaneously estimate both the position and the orientation of the mobile device using the light measurements alone, which has not been done before. The second challenge is that these indoor lights, they may have unknown location with respect to the access point. Eventually, we want to track the mobility with respect to the access point, so we want to localize these devices in these light sources in the indoor environment as well. So in my talk today, I will talk about SearchLight design first, in which I will explain our novel method to estimate both the position and the orientation of the devices using light measurements alone, as well as our method to localize the light anchors as well. Then I will talk about our 60 GHz beam steering protocol, in which we adopt the beams at both the access point side as well as the client side. Further, we have implemented SearchLight on a system on both hardware and a software wireless time simulator. So I will share some of the key results from our extensive experiments. And finally, I'll talk about how SearchLight compares to the existing protocols and what are the key advantages. So let's first talk about the position and orientation estimation method that we have devised for SearchLight. If you look at the light intensity which is received at a light sensor, it depends on three key factors. The first one is the distance between the light source and the sensor. The second factor is the irradiance angle between the light source and the sensor. And finally, we have the incidence angle or the angle of arrival at the light sensor. And hence, the light intensity depends on both the position and the orientation of the sensor and hence the device. Now, if you look at some of the existing work in this domain, prior work has shown visible light localization with at least 3 or more light anchors, and they basically use trilateration or multilateration techniques to achieve that. And they also show how we can distinguish between multiple light sensors and independently measure the light intensity. In fact, we will be borrowing this part of the system design from the prior work. However, in terms of the position and orientation estimation problem, there are two key limitations in the prior work. The first one is that these works, they assume a known position of the light anchors so that they can do trilateration. Whereas in our case, we do not want to put that restriction on our system and keep it more general. However, even if the position of the light anchors are known, these prior works, they assume a fixed and known orientation of the light sensors as well, so that the light intensity equations can be written in terms of the distance only, and they can do trilateration. However, that is clearly not the case in SearchLight, because we consider mobile devices which can have a random orientation and then they can rotate as well. So in our paper, we have presented a novel method for estimating both the position and orientation jointly, And the key idea there is to exploit multiple sensors in the form of an array. So we show in our paper that when putting more sensors into the system, the entropy of the sensing information is maximized if we place sensors at right angles to each other. So we propose a light sensor array with at least 6 light sensors as perpendicular faces of the device. So in our analysis, we show that by exploiting these light intensity equations and the model with a single light anchor, we still have less number of measurements than the number of parameters that we need to estimate. And if we keep on adding the anchors to our system, then with at least 3 light sources or anchors, we can solve for not only the position and orientation of the device, but also localize the light anchors with respect to the device. Further, we have also presented a recursive solution to further reduce the complexity and the computation time as compared to the numerical method. So all these details are in our paper, and we strongly encourage you to read our paper as well. So let's next look at the beam steering protocol in SearchLight. So the way we deal with the beam steering in SearchLight is in 2 phases. The first phase, we call it the training phase, which happens, for example, when a device associates with the access point. So at that point in time, the device has no knowledge or idea about what beams to use to communicate, or where the light anchors are with respect to the access point. So during the first phase, there are measurements in both 60 GHz band in the form of beamforming training, as well as light intensity measurements from the light anchors. And the device would, first of all, establish a directional link from the beamforming training process, as well as it would localize the light anchors with respect to itself by the method that I just explained. After the initial training, SearchLight enters a tracking phase, in which now the key idea is that we only have light measurements, light intensity measurements, and we do not require any further 60 GHz training or measurements. So in this, we have the 2 key steps in SearchLight. That first, the device tracks its position and orientation, and then it selects the beams which have the maximum directivity gain along the line of sight path, and keep on adopting the beams. So ideally, we want the device to remain in the tracking phase for the rest of the time, because there is no further training overhead in this phase. However, it is possible that, for example, if you have a line of sight path blockage, we may not have enough intensity measurements at the device, or we make an error in the estimation, or our estimation is off, and we can still have a link breakage. So in that case, SearchLight would fall back to the training phase, rediscover the links, and then enter the tracking phase again and cycle between the 2 phases. Finally, just a little bit more elaboration on the steering protocol. So for the client-side adaptation, since the light intensity measurements are local at the client side, so the client can adapt its beams without having to give any feedback to the access point. So in this case, for the client-side steering, it is completely local at the client, and hence the design is very distributed and scalable. Whereas for the access point side adaptation, we require some feedback so that the client can tell the AP which beams to use and how and when to change its beam. So for this, we require a single training frame, which can be sent as a standalone packet, or we can piggyback it to an ongoing transfer. And in our evaluation, we have extensively evaluated the overhead and the latency involved with this feedback process as well. So now let's move on to the implementation and evaluation of SearchLight. So as I explained earlier, we have implemented SearchLight on a hardware platform. So for this, we are using X60, which is the NI 60 GHz platform with a steerable phase array antenna with 24 elements. And here you can look at the beam patterns. They look very similar to a very practical off-the-shelf commercial access points as well. And they have irregular beams and significant side lobes, which creates a challenge in the beam steering. Further, we have also integrated a custom 6-sensor light sensor array that we are using off-the-shelf light sensors, so not any special light sensors are required, that we have integrated with the X60 platform. So using this hardware platform, we have done extensive experiments in a lot of different environments and mobility scenarios. However, due to short time today, I will only be focusing on one experiment, which is client translation. And this is a more challenging mobility scenario because it requires adaptation at both the access point side as well as the client side. So in this experiment, we have the access point and the client as the same height, which is 1 meter, and then we have ceiling mounted light anchors. For light anchors, we are considering 5 different light anchor positions. However, for a single experiment, we only turn on 3 of these 5 lights, which is the minimum required for SearchLight. And hence, we repeat the experiment for all possible combination of the light anchor topology. For the client motion here, we are considering 4 different trajectories, part A through D, at different starting distances from the access point. And in this trajectory, the client starts in front of the access point, performs the training phase only once, and then it enters the tracking phase as it moves 2 meters perpendicular to the access point. So let's first look at the anchor localization accuracy during this this experiment. So here we have the anchor positioning error in meters along the y-axis, whereas we have the trajectory ID along the x-axis, which is showing you an increase in the average distance from the access point. So here we can see that first of all, SearchLight achieves an average estimation error of within accuracy of within 35 to 40 centimeters of the true value, which is on par with the other or the existing visible light localization protocols. However, in our case, we are not only localizing the light anchors, but also estimating the position and the orientation of the light. Moreover, we also directly see the impact of changing anchor positions, that changing inter-anchor client distances. So, for example, here you can see that for the trajectory D, we have 2 light anchors which are closer to the client trajectory. As a result, we see that the average error, which is a function of the inter-source sensor distance, starts to increase and then decreases slightly for the last trajectory because of the closeness or proximity of the 2 light anchors. Next, we look at the beam steering accuracy in SearchLight. So, to capture this beam steering accuracy, I'm using a metric called beam index distance. So, this captures how far you are in beam search space as compared to the optimal beam which would be discovered from an exhaustive search. So, a beam index distance of 0 means that we actually predicted the correct beam with the highest signal strength. Whereas if we are off with a couple of beams, that means we are off by this many beam indexes in the search space. So here we can see that the SearchLight for both the access point side and the client side beam selection, we are within 2 beams at most the optimal search for more than 90% of the measurement instances. As we look at the SNR performance, because the signal strength or the signal to noise ratio is the key parameter which would determine what data rates we are getting at the link layer. So here we are looking at the SNR comparison or the SNR loss. So I define the SNR loss as the reduction in the SNR due to the SearchLight based predicted beam as compared to the optimal beam. So for almost 35 or 40% cases, we are getting the same SNR as the optimal search, and then for around again 90% of the measurement instances, we are within 1 to 1.5 dB of the optimal search. Therefore, despite unknown anchor locations, SearchLight can solely use the light measurements to track changes in both the access point side beam and the client side beam and achieve a link strength which is very close to the optimal search. Finally, we have also implemented SearchLight on a trace and model-driven wireless LAN simulator, and that is because we are limited in terms of our hardware, for example, in terms of the number of nodes that we have or the mobility patterns that we can generate. So with this wireless LAN simulator, we have done more extensive experiments in terms of contention, overhead due to feedback packets, and the latency in the access point sector feedback. So all these results are in our paper, but here I will only focus on, again, the client translation experiment to show the performance of overhead comparison and the throughput. So first, have a look at the training overhead comparison, and here we are comparing SearchLight to a baseline 8.1180 strategy, which would be the IEEE standard. So here again we have percentage overhead along the y-axis in percentage of the time, and then we have increasing contention in the form of number of increasing clients from 1 to 10 along the axis. So first of all, we see that for the baseline scheme, even with a single client, the baseline scheme is spending almost 3 to 5% of the total network time in training for the link due to the repeated mobility based weightage. Whereas in case of SearchLight, we do the training only once and then we are adapting the beams based on the visible light measurements. So the SearchLight overhead is negligible even with 10 clients because of the shorter duration of the feedback packets. This reflects in the throughput performance as well. So on the right side graph here, we have a normalized throughput along the y-axis, where we are normalizing to the maximum achievable throughput if we were using maximum data rate and the optimal beams at the access point and the client. So here, first of all, we see that again the baseline scheme or the IEEE standard, it achieves only within 55–60% of the achievable throughput under these mobility scenarios. The throughput loss is due to the training overhead and rate under selection as well. Moreover, as the number of clients increases, the throughput degrades further. In comparison with SearchLight, we observe that the overhead that the training time that it is saving as compared to the baseline scheme reflects in an increased throughput because SearchLight uses that time to actually transmit useful data on the link. Even though it may have a slightly lower SNR compared to the optimal search, but since we are using that time to transmit data, it reflects in a higher throughput. So we observe that with the increasing number of clients, SearchLight achieves almost 60 to 100% performance improvement as compared to the baseline. Finally, I'll talk about some of the related work in this field and how SearchLight compares to that. So there have been both in-band and out-of-band strategies proposed for addressing the training overhead problem in 60 GHz networks. If we look at the in-band solutions, they focus on strategies such as efficient beam training, channel profiling, backup paths, and beamwidth adaptation. However, the key challenge here is that even though these strategies reduce the training overhead, we still have to spend some time within the 60 GHz channel to train for the link. Moreover, there is also a rate loss associated if we are switching to a backup path or a wider beam. Whereas in SearchLight, we are receiving zero in-band training overhead after the initial beam alignment, and we also align the beams for the narrowest beamwidth level. And finally, there is another work. There is only one work in out-of-band scaling, which actually is from our group as well, back in Infocom 2015, in which the idea here is to estimate the angle of arrival in the legacy band using large arrays of antennas and then steer the beams along the line of sight path. However, there are two key challenges. The first one is that we have rich multipath in the lower band, and the propagation is very different from the 60 GHz band. Moreover, we have challenge that it is harder to have large antenna arrays at the client devices. Whereas in SearchLight, we have passive light sensing based on off-the-shelf light sensors, and we achieve this with very low power consumption. So here is a summary of my talking points today, in which I explained SearchLight design and our implementation on both a hardware platform and a wireless LAN simulator, and so that the performance over the air and in simulations we achieve a significant improvement over the baseline strategy. So at this time, I'm done with